Hello, everyone. Welcome back to season 2 of Live, Laugh, Lies. It's your host, Susie Evans. I'm so excited to be back for season 2. We have been working hard to bring you guys really incredible guests that are super aligned with the theme and niche of Live, Laugh, Lies. We had so much fun on season 1, exploring different avenues, exploring different stories, experimenting with all kinds of different formats and different types of conversations, and it was really fun. I feel like this season we've really niched in on cheating, scandals, cults, lies, true crime adjacent. I'm really excited for you guys to hear what we've been working on. It's been so much fun. We are here to expose all the lies, and I truly can't think of a more perfect guest to kick off season 2 than Denise Brown, who is the sister of Nicole Simpson, who was murdered 30 years ago, a part of the O.J. Simpson trial. And Denise has become an incredible advocate for domestic violence. She's somebody that we are so excited to have on the podcast, so honored. She really is such a professional and so wonderful at what she does. So it was unlike any other interview I'd really done before. I was a little bit nervous. It's the first one back for season 2, and I just felt like there was a lot of pressure on it, but I was really just so impressed with her. She's just such an incredible human and doing amazing work in the world. But I did want to put out a trigger warning for anyone that might be unsettled by the topics of domestic violence. So putting that out there, we are going to be discussing DV and a multitude of other topics, but it's a really important conversation. I'm so honored that she was excited to join us here at Live, Laugh, Lies. I hope you guys love the episode. There's one part in particular that I really loved that I already shared with my family, and it's something that we're going to implement with my niece and nephew. You'll hear it on the podcast, but there's an exercise you can do with children where you trace your hands and you make a pledge that hands are not for hurting. And I just think it's so beautiful. I took away a lot. I hope you guys do as well. Welcome back to season 2. Let's get into it.
Everyone just wants to live, laugh, love. But in this disappointing world, there are many who are faced with lies. This is Live, Laugh, Lies.
Denise Brown, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored that I get the opportunity to talk with you. Your strength, your dedication to honoring Nicole's memory and helping others is truly inspiring. I'd love to start the interview off by asking a little bit about your childhood with Nicole and what it was like growing up together.
Oh my gosh. Well, we were both born in Germany. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah. My mother is German and, or was German. She unfortunately passed away. And so Nicole and I, my mom and dad met in Germany. He was with the Stars and Stripes paper. Nicole was almost 5 when we left Germany to go out to California. And so, yeah, we had a really great time. And actually our first language was German.
Wow. I did not know this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we were we were less than 2 years apart in age. So the two of us, we just did everything together. I mean, we were always like this. I think one reason, and a huge reason, is because neither one of us spoke English when we got here. So we were like the best of friends, just hanging out together and speaking our language, which was our little secret language that we had. And, my mom put us into school when we got here, and she said, oh my gosh, you two girls learned English in like 3 weeks. You were speaking English.
I feel like as kids, you just absorb everything.
Oh, you're like little sponges. And now I can't learn a language to save my life.
Same. It's a struggle. I've tried many times.
We had a great time growing up. I mean, it was in a small place outside of Frankfurt. I lived in Frankfurt for 2 years, and then when Nicole was born, we moved to a small little village called Rollwald, which is about 45 minutes outside of Frankfurt. It was fun, and I do remember a lot of it because we used to go back and forth quite a bit. And my grandparents came to live with us, so I still speak German to this day, which is nice. And, because Well, you know how the older generation, now me included, but the older generation before when I was younger, my grandmother, she tried to learn English. And of course, my mother laughed at her when she said, instead of saying knife, she said knife.
Knife.
So my mother laughed. My mother laughed. And my grandmother said, okay, I am never speaking English again. And so anyway, I mean, that was good for us because we kept up our German.
So you and Nicole both spoke German into your adult lives.
Both the first language, yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so cool. What comes to your mind when you think of her?
Oh my gosh, now that she's gone,
Yeah.
oh gosh, it's been like almost 30 years. And what comes to mind? I miss her terribly. The last thing I said to her was, I love you, and we'll talk tomorrow, and I'll see you next week, because the kids were going to come down. Our kids, my son and my sister's son still had school for another week. Nicole's kids, they were out of school already. And I said, you know what? Why don't you guys just stay up here, let the kids finish school, and then we'll see you guys come down to Laguna, because we were living in Laguna Beach at the time. Come down to Laguna and, we'll hang out for the summer and it'll be great.
Yeah.
And that night, Nicole was murdered.
On June 12, 1994, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were brutally murdered outside her Los Angeles home. Nicole's ex-husband, former NFL star and actor O.J. Simpson, was charged but later acquitted in a highly publicized trial, though he was found liable in a civil case. The case became a media spectacle, spreading false narratives and misinformation. However, the case also brought national attention to domestic violence, inspiring Nicole's sister, our esteemed guest today, Denise Brown, to dedicate her life to advocacy for victims.
Over the years, there have been so many narratives about Nicole's life, her relationship with OJ, and even the circumstances of her passing. And as somebody who knew her best, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions you've heard that you would like to correct?
Oh my gosh, there's a couple of them. One is that she was into drugs and she was a drug addict, right? Nicole was so far from being a drug addict and being into drugs. Yes, okay, I'm not going to deny that we have tried them and, the whole thing, and we have partied before, but she was so far from being a drug addict or addicted to drugs or addicted to drinking. And that was all from that side, that team that started these rumors, which were so false. And honestly, they were more him than they were Nicole. So actually, in reality, he was just looking at himself and he was just telling everybody, okay, well, let's just put it on her. But it was actually him who was into all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that was one of the worst things, I think. And then also that, she was this party girl. Why? Because she loved dancing. She was a single woman. Nicole was 18 years old when they met. So Nicole didn't have that. For me, for instance, I was able to go out, I was able to go dancing, I was able to go out with friends, I was able to go do things. And I love to go dancing. I mean, I think it's great exercise, one. Yeah. And all of us she didn't get that opportunity, right? Because they got into their relationship when she was 18 years old. She was just a kid. Yeah. So when she was divorced, I think she was like 33 years old. That's when she started living her life and going out and dancing and having a good time with friends and things like that. And all of a sudden she was a whore. And I'm like, what? She liked to dance? And so that was something that really upset me when I was sitting there and I was listening to all these made up things about my sister. And there was nothing I could do because we had a gag order.
Oh my gosh. What does that mean?
Well, a gag order is something where the judge will tell the people that are in the courtroom that you cannot speak. You cannot talk. You cannot do anything or talk about any of the trial. Well, I did. And I thought, oh my God, am I going to jail? This is crazy. But there was one point where I just had enough. And I went up to I guess it was the 19th floor or something like that, where the media was. And I went up there and I said, listen, I have to say something. And she said, what? And I said, if OJ's so innocent, why is he trying to suppress all the evidence? Well, that I thought, oh my God, okay, did I do the wrong thing? What did I do? Because I had no idea. You don't know what it's like to go to court for especially murder. And, the judge tells you to do something and you're not following his rule. And I thought, oh my God, what did I just do? I mean, I got scared because I thought, this is the law. This is legal. And, what am I doing? But I just got so upset with some of the things that were going on that I just needed to say it. I had to say it. And
Right.
I figured I have to somehow, some way defend my sister. And that's when I started speaking out about domestic violence as well. But those two misconceptions, I just really want to be very clear on the fact that, what? She's allowed to go dancing. She was a single woman. She was not a drug addict. She was a beautiful woman and she loved life.
Yeah.
And, she would never, ever, ever leave her children without somebody that she knew. And that was their nanny. And if it wasn't their nanny, it was one of the family members, one of her sisters. There's 4 girls. So she would never just leave them with just anybody, ever.
Right. And honestly, just hearing you speak about this perspective and even, knowing that it was 30 years ago, I feel like so much has changed in 30 years for women. I think one of those things, obviously, is just like we've progressed as a society and we've evolved. And the narrative that it sounds like OJ's side was painting of her as this party girl or irresponsible or any of those things, which regardless, even if any of that was true, doesn't justify anything that happened. But just to go out and paint her this way to the media and to the public is so awful. But I do think something good, that has come over the years is like how much our society has changed and how that narrative just wouldn't, I just don't think it would hold up today. I think people would use social media, which is another thing that can be so powerful and it can be so good and so bad. But I think people would use social media. And I have to think like, I almost wish I wish you had social media back then, because I feel like that's how people take their narrative back,
Well, you know what? In a way, I agree with you. So I was very much for the cameras in the courtroom because I thought, people could see what was going on. And because people were asking me that all the time back then. And I said, you know what? I'm really glad because they got to see what was happening and the chaos and the manipulation and all of the stuff that was happening. But you know what? The good that has come out of Nicole's murder and has been extraordinary, and then also like 10 steps back. The Violence Against Women Act was passed. That was stalled in Senate appropriations for years before Nicole's murder. And I didn't know this until just now, which was 30 years later, how long they had been trying to pass the Violence Against Women Act. And I was actually going to a shelter, and there was a girlfriend of mine who was traveling with me at the time. And she got the call from Senator Joe Biden's office, our former president of the United States. And so anyhow, he was the co-author of the Violence Against Women Act in 1995. So Senator Joe Biden and Senator Orrin Hatch, a Republican and a Democrat, co-authored the Violence Against Women Act, but it was stalled. So going there, my friend, she called up the executive director of the shelter and she said, you know what? Senator Biden's office is calling Denise to come and testify for the Violence Against Women Act. Well, the woman on the other end, she said, tell her to go because we have been trying to do this for the longest time. But my friend never told me this, right?
Wow.
So anyhow, so she says, go, we need it passed. We need to do this. So I went there and we were able to, and this is something I'm very proud of. And I think it was just because of Nicole that we were able to get the funding from $18 million to $32 million for victims of domestic violence. So even law enforcement officers, I don't know you probably don't remember because you're young, but Polaroid cameras, you know,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Polaroid camera.
Yeah.
Law enforcement officers got Polaroid cameras so that when they went on a domestic violence call, they were able to take pictures of what was happening to these victims. And then, of course, the shelters were able to be funded. And then the following year, Senator Joe Biden, our former president, he started the National 24-Hour Domestic Violence Hotline in Austin, Texas, which is wonderful because that's a number 1-800-799-SAFE for any victim nationally to call if they're in need of help. If they are a victim of domestic violence, they're needing help and they're needing to get out. So a lot of good stuff happened after Nicole's murder. But the saddest thing for me is that it took my sister.
Yeah.
And
of course,
it wasn't other victims of domestic violence that had previously lost their lives. Or, you know, that have come forward. That was something that I had a lot of anger for a lot of reasons, but I was really, really, really angry because I thought, why did it take Nicole's life for people to actually recognize the fact that domestic violence exists? Why do people have to lose their lives? And so, yeah, I was angry for a very long time. And I think that was probably what gave me the energy and the strength to continue and to travel and to do what I did. For 4 years, I did not step foot in California. I mean, I did probably 3 days out of the month, you know, and if it wouldn't have been for my mother and father watching my son, I would have never done this. Wow. So grateful to my mom and dad for allowing me to go out and to speak about domestic violence and to go to these shelters and to educate people on the dangers. And actually, I was educating myself too, because I would hear from the women and the children in the shelters, and I would go there. They were my education, telling me their stories. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the things that you saw, like little boys beating up pillows, so angry. And then you see like these little girls, they're just cowering in the corner, just going, oh my God, you know, not knowing what's going on. I mean, it's really, really, really sad.
Have you guys been grabbing takeout more than you've been hitting the gym or hitting the kitchen to make healthy, fabulous, delicious meals for yourself? Honestly, it's no judgment because same, if you guys listen to the show, if you guys follow me on Insta, you know that I am a takeout lover. I love to go out to eat. I love to bring food home. I love to order food in. But one way that I have made little changes to help me curate my life to be more aligned with my desire to be healthy is a service called Every Plate. If you guys are not familiar, you might want to listen up if you're interested in making better for you choices, because Every Plate can help you dish up better habits with delicious, easy recipes delivered straight to your door, including their new Calorie Smart, Carb Smart, and Protein Smart options, which for me is amazing. Add to cart. I don't track my macros or my calories, but what I do try to do is get protein with every meal, and I try to be conscious of how many carbs I'm eating. So with these new options, it makes it so easy just to be more conscious and be more aware of what you're putting into your body. With these new Smart Swap recipes, you can swap out flour tortillas for lettuce wraps, white rice for lettuce, potatoes for sweet potatoes, and just to make better for you meals that much easier. So skip the store and enjoy wholesome, homemade meals that cost less than groceries. Start with 50% off your first box with code LIVELAUGHLIES50 at everyplate.com/liveLaughLies. Everyplate offer is valid with auto-renewing subscription, so check it out at everyplate.com/liveLaughLies. Those of you that follow me on social media or listen from time to time here, I have talked about my personal struggles with my skin, which for me, being a very freckly person, it's dark spots, it's sunspots, it's aging. I'm trying to do everything I can to preserve the quality of my skin, and I occasionally will go in and do like a facial or a laser here and there, but for the most part I really lean on my day-to-day care, which is why I want to talk to you guys today about Apostrophe, who is one of our sponsors on the podcast. And Apostrophe is a really cool platform where you actually will get connected with a dermatology team, And you're going to go through all of your skin concerns, whether it's acne or aging or anything along those lines. And you will actually get a curated treatment based on what it is that you're looking for, which I feel like is so important. It's really like the day-to-day treatment and the upkeep that keeps your skin looking young and youthful. So to get started, you'll complete a virtual derm visit and consultation through Apostrophe, and then they can provide you access to prescription treatments as needed. We have a special deal for our audience, so get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/livelaughlies. That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, go to apostrophe.com/livelaughlies and then use our code livelaughlies at sign up, and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you to Apostrophe for sponsoring today's episode.
And I thought when we started the Nicole Brown Foundation that domestic violence was stopped. And that's how naive I was about domestic violence, this dirty little secret that nobody wanted to talk about. The foundation did its job. We closed it in 2010 because, the awareness and everything that it did, it served its purpose. And then there's so many amazing organizations out there. I just thought, why do we need one more organization to take funds away from these shelters? So hence, we closed the foundation. But going out and speaking is not for our foundation, not to raise monies for the foundation, but to raise awareness and to raise funds for the organizations that I go and speak to.
Amazing.
So yeah, because they're the ones that actually do the work. They go out and they are pounding the pavement trying to help these victims of domestic violence, help their children. And, and they help men as well.
That's amazing. I'm curious, since you've kind of been in the field and seen so much of this yourself, I don't even know this is a naive question, but I'm like, what do you think is the solution? Like, do we infiltrate people when they're young and teach them better habits and how to manage anger and how to communicate effectively? Or is it just providing resources because it's, these things are bound to happen? Unfortunately, no matter what, you're probably always going to have domestic violence happen. But how do we address the root cause?
Well, okay, I was introduced to a program at the very beginning, and I think that this is probably the most important thing. I think we start with children. Okay, children who come from violent homes are 4 times more likely to become violent themselves. Okay, so if we start with children, and then that's what I was introduced to a program in Duluth, Minnesota. It is called Hands Are Not for Hitting. And it's wonderful because there's a curriculum that goes into the schools, but it would kindergarten through 3rd for the younger kids, and then 4th through 6th. And people have expanded on this Hands Are Not for Hitting. But the one part that I absolutely loved, and we did it with Nicole's kids, we did it with my son, my sister's son, and a few of their friends. But a child takes their hand, places it on the piece of paper, traces the outline of their hand, colors their hand whatever color they want to, writes whatever kind of sayings they want on them, and then they take a pledge. Hands are not for hitting, words are not for hurting, my hand will not commit violence. It's something so simple, but so important for these kids to know. And, after Nicole's murder, we had 3 boys and 1 girl living under the same roof. So the 3 boys, they roughhoused and they got a little rambunctious and, and all of a sudden I hear them. This is after we did the Hands Are Not for Hitting, which was probably a couple of months later. All of a sudden, I go and I hear all this noise and this ruckus, and I'm like I go into the room, and the first person that says, "Oh my God, hands are not for hitting," was Justin, because he remembered that hands are not for hitting. He remembered doing his hand a couple of months before, and he was only 5 years old.
For context, when Denise refers to Justin, she is referring to her nephew, Nicole and OJ's son.
And then when I asked my son when he was 19, I said, "Sean, do you remember that?" And he says, yeah, Mom, I wish you would have done that with us every year. I was like, wow, okay. So from being 7 years old to being 19 years old, he remembered hands are not for hitting, words are not for hurting, my hand will not commit violence.
Wow.
So I think this is something that you can do with your child, you can do with your grandchildren, you can do with your niece and nephews,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can do with little kids, your friends' kids, and just do these little hands are not for hitting, and they remember it and they understand it. And the colors, okay, I'm going to explain the colors that I got back. And the reason for Justin saying, hey, you guys stop, is because everybody else was like rainbow colors, reds, pinks, purples, really pretty, right?
Yeah.
But Justin had taken a black crayon and he scratched it across the palm of his hand. And in the palm of his hand, he put a little red heart. And I was like, whoa. That is so far from the bright colors that I had received and looked at that I called up the therapist. I said, Ken, I said, what does this mean? And he says, Denise, you have a little boy there with a broken heart.
Oh my gosh.
Killed me. But that's the story behind Justin going, oh my God, you guys stop. Hands are not for hitting. And so, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that just killed me.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine all the things that you guys had to process and go through, you know, after experiencing what you have, but you've handled it beautifully and you're obviously an advocate and have done amazing work.
Thank you.
I feel like I know the answer, but looking back, do you feel the system failed Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah.
Big time.
Big time.
Yeah, it failed Nicole because, first of all, it just in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
You know, why they moved it to downtown Los Angeles. See, I didn't know much about any of this. You know, who in their right mind actually, or in a million years, thinks that somebody in your family for 17 years could actually murder somebody? You never in a million years think that, and you're never ready for it. Now there's a lot more information. You know, they told us we can't talk, we can't say anything, we can't do anything. And it was like, oh my God, okay, you know, because it's the law. And so we had no idea that we had rights at all, that we could say anything or do anything or, you know, ask anything pretty much. I mean, it was a scary, scary situation. So it was really a learning experience. And I know now things are different, especially in courts. People have the right to speak up. People have the right to a lot more than I knew that we had the rights to, you know. So in that respect, it's different now. I think that for victims of domestic violence, you know, it's still a very complicated issue. It's very difficult for them. It's difficult for them to get a restraining order. It's difficult for them to go to court because they're so manipulated and so beaten down by the perpetrator. Oftentimes, I mean, the courts are on the side of the perpetrator and saying, oh my God, she's crazy, she's crazy, she's crazy, you know, I love her. They usually are the financial support of a victim of domestic violence. That's oftentimes the case. And so they have the power to control the narrative with all the money in the world. They don't even have to have all the money in the world, but they are very together and they don't look like, you know, oftentimes victims are just scared out of their minds. They don't know if they're coming or going, or, you know, there's just so much fear involved in going to court and then seeing the man who abused you and beat you to holy living hell. And, you know, you have to either get up and testify, or you're sitting there in the same room and he's giving you dirty looks and like, oh my God, I'm going to get you, you know. And these are scary things for victims of domestic violence because it has been their reality for a very long time.
Right.
And it takes a lot for a victim of domestic violence to come forward, to even call 911. So for me, I usually tell people, be supportive. You know, a victim of domestic violence will go back usually 7 to 10 times before she actually leaves the situation. So be supportive, be there for them, and, don't get upset when they go back to the abusive partner, because that's what happens.
I feel like that's such a common thing, whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse. People go back, and like I've seen it in my adult life and even in my young adult life, in my, late teens, early 20s, when friends either stopped communicating with friends and family about an abusive behavior that was going on because they know their friends and family are upset with them when they go back. And so I almost think it's really good advice you're giving. And I know it's hard when you're seeing someone you love continue to go back to somebody. It's really hard, but it is really important to stay supportive and to stay an open ear for that person, because it's important to listen to them and be able to look out if there are signs and to be able to encourage them to leave if it's getting dangerous. So for anyone listening, I think that it can be incredibly hard to listen to your friends over and over again when they're stuck in a cycle of abuse. But I think it's a great point you make. I mean, 7 to 10 times, it's wild to think about, but you have to stick through it with the people you love.
Exactly. And what I'd like to tell people too who are listening is the cycle of domestic violence is about power and control of one human being over another. There's the verbal, the emotional, the psychological abuse that you were just talking about, the chipping away at somebody's self-esteem. You're ugly, you're worthless, you're stupid. Those put downs, they weigh on you. And then there's that physical violence, the hitting, the kicking, the punching, the throwing up against walls. And then if a victim survives all that abuse, then there's the honeymoon phase of, oh, baby, I'm so sorry, the gifts, the flowers, and all the excuses,
Right.
And so that cycle of domestic violence that I love to share with people, because it's a continuing cycle and it can start very, very subtle. It's like, well, why are you talking to that guy over there? Do you like that guy over there? Why are you wearing that short skirt? What, you want people to look at you? And then oftentimes, like younger girls, back in the day when I was younger, it was like, oh my God, he really likes me. He thinks I'm really cute and he just wants to be mine. He wants me to be his. So, and that's like that real subtle way of sort of starting to control you. And it's like, and then they can start isolating you from your friends who say, well, God, why aren't we going out together? Well, it's because he on the other side, who is somebody that you really care about, is telling you, well, why? You don't want to be with me on the weekend, or you don't want to be with me in your spare time?
Right.
So there's all these like little things that start. And then, of course, once it gets physical, then you're in an abusive relationship. But all those little signs beforehand, all that manipulation and the mental, emotional, psychological stuff, that's all a form of domestic violence too. And that's really, really important for a victim to understand and to start learning about, especially now. And I've been speaking at a lot of the sororities lately. So, which has been really, really good. Yeah, Alpha Omega Chi and at High Point University. And they invited me to come out there to speak. And it was really interesting because they're all between 20 and 22 years old. So they were not even born 30 years ago when the trial was going on, when my sister was murdered. And there were 5 mothers that were there that actually knew what was going on, but everybody else, 200 some, youth, young adults were there listening, and we were able to, to talk to them. And it was like so wonderful to be able to get the message out to these young people and to tell them, you have rights. And I want to read this to you, if you don't mind.
Of course, yeah.
A couple of them, because victims of domestic violence, they have rights, right? Okay, you have the right to be safe. You have the right to love and to be loved. You have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to be human, not perfect. You have the right to your own opinions, to express them, and to be taken seriously. You have the right to grow and change, and that includes changing your mind.
Right.
You have the right to say no.
Love that. It's powerful.
Yeah, there's some really important things. Victims of domestic violence need to know that they do have rights. And
Right.
and I think the most important one is you have the right to say no.
Yes. Yeah. The right to say no, the right to change your mind. I feel like those are two really big ones that people often forget. And sometimes people feel entitled to be able to tell you what they think is right or wrong, or that they want to complain that you change your mind. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's true. It's a right. It's a human right.
You have the right to do that. And, it's, there's three things I think victims of domestic violence have in common. Hope, shame, and fear. They have hope that things are going to get better, like they used to be when things were good at the beginning of their relationship.
Right.
The shame of not wanting anybody to know, not your best friend, not your family member. And the fear of the unknown. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Especially if they have children.
Yeah.
But, those three things, every victim of domestic violence that I have spoken to in the shelters, and I have visited, every time I go and speak someplace, I visit a shelter because I want to know what they're doing. I want to hear the story. They're the ones that keep me going and keep me out there speaking about domestic violence. It's not for Nicole anymore. Nicole's not here and I can't bring her back. It's for, your sisters, your mothers, your aunts, your uncles, your brothers. It's for the people that are listening. It's for them that I do this work. It's not Nicole anymore.
That just gave me chills to hear. It's beautiful that she brought you to this like journey in your life. Like I'm sure it was unexpected. I don't think anyone starts their life thinking, oh, I'm going to be an advocate for whatever it might be. And unfortunately, devastatingly, it was the murder of your sister, but I'm sure she'd be so proud of you for everything that you're doing. And it is a beautiful journey that you've been on, and what you're doing is so incredible.
Well, I appreciate that.
Denise's strength in transforming her pain into purpose is truly remarkable. In addition to her advocacy work for victims of domestic violence, she continues to honor her sister's memory through powerful projects like Lifetime's documentary on the life and murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, ensuring Nicole's story is never forgotten.
That's the one that we did and that we were involved in. And so that's something I'm really, really proud of that we were able to do for the 30-year mark of her murder. And, I was asked to do that at the 20-year, and I said, no, it just doesn't feel right. And then at the 30, I said, it may be time for us to do something. And so we started, probably a year and a half before it actually came out in June 1st it came out, June 1st and 2nd. But this is something that we did with some of her friends that had never gone out there and spoken at all, because we wanted people to get to know who Nicole was as a person, as a child. She was dancing around. I mean, she loved to dance. She was even dancing, when she was a kid. She was always jumping around or hopping around or doing something, So we wanted people to hear her voice. We wanted people to really get to know her just a little bit. I know the media, of course, the networks have to put in all the other things because she was married to this man for 17 years. So all of that had to come into play. But I'm just really proud of what we did. So if your audience wants to see it, it's the life and murder of Nicole Brown Simpson is what my family did. My sisters and I did. But I'm really, really, really happy that we were able to do that, to remember Nicole in that way.
I'm gonna have to watch that one because I just watched the Netflix one. Obviously, that just came out, which was really interesting because I think I was a baby when the trial was going on, so I obviously wasn't conscious of what was going on. But it was always a staple of my childhood in the sense that it was talked about. My parents, I always say my parents did such an amazing job of talking about mental health growing up, and my mom always worked really hard to instill good values and like make me aware of, abusive tendencies in partners. And she just always was so good about communicating, what's normal, what's not normal, and, knowing what you're worth and your rights and things like that. Like my mom was just amazing with all that stuff.
You're so lucky. You're so fortunate to have a family like that, because so many don't.
I was going to say, I think that it's very possible that, and it's as horrible as it is that it maybe took this, but I'm like, it's possible because this was obviously a huge media sensation, that because that was happening when I was a kid, it's very possible that this influenced my mom and influenced the way she raised me. And, it was very important to her that I learned about that. And even my entire generation, I feel like obviously there's still so many issues and there's still domestic violence that happens, but I do think we are evolving. And as horrible as it is that it happened, like I do think it has shaped a lot of society. And, obviously with your work and with a lot of the work that other people are doing too.
Sure.
It's good to see how things have changed and evolved at least a little bit. I wanted to ask you some questions about domestic violence from your experience in working in the field. What are some of the common misconceptions about domestic violence, and what do you wish more people understood about that reality?
Well, God, misconceptions. Oh, it can't happen to me, or it can't happen in our family. It doesn't happen in our community. We don't have domestic violence in our circle of friends. You don't know. 1 in 3 women can lose their life. Okay, so when you're in a room full of people, count 1, 2, 3. You're a victim of domestic violence. 1, 2, 3. You're a victim of domestic violence. 1, 2, 3. I mean, those numbers are staggering. Sometimes they're 1 in 4. Sometimes they're 1 in 3. Now I've even heard, like out of Texas, they're even close to 1 in 2.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which is staggering. I just thought, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous, because I mean, this sounds like we're 30 years ago, when we were first learning domestic violence. But I think with, like the things that you're doing and, keeping the word out there, I think social media is, like you said earlier, it's good and bad. If you use it for good, it can be really, really great. It can get the word out there, doing what you're doing, this podcast, and educating, people your age and your followers. And you know what? You never know how many calls you may get from this who may need help. And then you can give them the 24-hour National Domestic Violence Hotline number.
Right.
You can save a life doing just what you're doing. And so the misconceptions, I mean, there's many out there, but I think the fact that it doesn't happen in our community, it doesn't happen in our society, it doesn't happen in our religion, those are some of the key ones.
If you could change one thing about how the justice system handles domestic violence cases, what would it be?
Believe the victim. I think that's just probably as simple as that. Believe the victim, because it takes so much for a victim of domestic violence just to even make that 911 call. So I always encourage, like, law enforcement officers, you may get 100 phone calls to the same house. Go out there, and she may go back, but maybe that 101 call is that call where you're going to save that victim's life. And so I just always encourage, law enforcement. I encourage people to be supportive, be there for one another, love one another, and just, help that person. Like we said earlier, 7 to 10 times they go back to an abusive partner. So, be there for them and don't let them fall through the cracks. And I think that with our justice system, I think that, the doctors, the nurses, or our whole society, doctors, nurses, law enforcers, lawmakers, teachers, everybody in our society needs to work together, because if one piece of that is missing, somebody could end up losing their life.
Right.
And so, make that 911 call if you hear somebody screaming or yelling. I always tell people, what? Everybody does it for, like, Amber Alerts. They hand out that picture of the child that's been abducted. Do the same for domestic violence victims, because it takes so much for them to call 911. And it's the hardest call in the world for them to make.
I love that. I'm curious, what are some of the warning signs that someone might be in an abusive relationship, and what should their loved ones do to support them?
Well, I think the support is just always there. There was only one woman that actually, I told her, I said, you can't physically remove somebody out of a domestic violence situation. And she raised her hand and she goes, I did. And I said, well, tell me about it. I love hearing that, because how did you do it? She goes, I grabbed my daughter and I said, you're leaving. And I think she was like 17 years old, so she was still underage. So
yeah.
I thought, okay, well, that's okay. At least that young lady is safe and she's alive today because her mom grabbed her out of that abusive relationship. I think that if your child is over the age of 18 and they are on their own, I think what you need to do, and this is what I told a young man this once, and I was at Brooklyn College speaking, and he says, I know my sister's being abused. What can I do? And I said, learn everything you can about domestic violence. Learn about the cycle of domestic violence. Learn about it. Set that person down and just say, hey, listen, this is what I've learned. This is what I know. And you're going to get no, denial. This is not happening to me. But what you've done is you've opened up that door to communication.
Yeah.
So if you are supportive, then after you have opened up that door to communication, when she is ready to leave or he is ready to leave, they just might come to you. And I said some of the wrong things. I'll be honest. I said, why don't you just leave? Get away from that. You know what? You got to get away from them. You got to go. Why are you staying? So I did do wrong things. So I want to encourage people, don't do what I did.
Yeah.
Be there, be supportive, and educate yourself on domestic violence, because you can save a life. I truly believe that. You know what you're talking about, and you're not just that mom or that dad saying, you got to get out of that relationship. He's bad for you. He's no good. He's, whatever. It's about learning. It's about educating yourself. And I learn new things every single day. Ongoing education.
And if you could speak directly to someone listening right now who's in an abusive relationship but feels trapped, what would you say to them?
I'd say call the 24-hour national hotline. They have got people there that can talk to you. They can guide you on where to go, what to do. You can contact your local shelter as well, depending on where you live. They will help you put together a safety plan, which is something you need, because victims of domestic violence are in 75% more danger after they leave their domestic violence situation. So you need a safety plan. Yeah, you need to have that. And you need to have that in place. And the people that can best help you with that are the people at the shelters, the people that answer their crisis line. They can educate you, they can help you, and they can guide you on what you need to do to get out safely.
Amazing. Okay, and my last question for you today is, if Nicole were here today, what do you think she would say about the work you've done in her name?
Well, I'm hoping she would be proud of me.
I'm sure she would, yeah.
I'm hoping that she would say, right on, keep fighting the good fight, and, just try to help save lives.
Yeah, beautiful.
Because that's what I would tell her. Good. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Denise, it's been so incredible chatting with you today. You are just so inspiring. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really grateful that you came on here and shared with us some of the insights that you have, and I think you're doing amazing work, so thank you so much. Is there a place where people can find you, follow you, and get to know you and what you do out in the world a little bit more?
Well, I am on social media. I have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Denise Brown, TOO, too. I didn't realize I had a Denise Brown account. So I started another one, Denise Brown too. But on social media. And then I am just now putting together a website, denisebrown.com. So they can always email me through that as well. But that is a work in progress.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The honor was all mine.
This podcast has been brought to you by Podcast Nation.